Welcome, and thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to take a journey into the Great Lakes region of North America. Now, if you want the short and sweet explanation, you can check out the History Channel. We created a series called How the Earth Was Made, and it basically dissolves all mysteries. Everything has been explained by the experts. We are going to trust the scientists and walk away. Or you can follow me to an alternative view of history. And of course the link to that video will be in the description. I'm not sure if that History Channel video is available in all areas. What I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to take you on a journey around the Great Lakes. We're going to be scouring the shorelines. We have a segment on geological phenomena, and we have a segment on old buildings. So I hope you'll join me on this journey as we stumble through some of the major cities of North America: Detroit, Cleveland, Toronto, Milwaukee, Chicago, and of course some of the smaller cities as well. And I'm going to present to you my theory. Obviously it's a working theory on what may have happened as it relates to the circuit board Earth theory, the frying of the circuit board, and the possibility that we're looking at some form of devastation as a result of a blast or a surge of energy, and that might explain away what we're looking at here. Basically this pockmarked Earth. You see this in northern Russia as well, but we definitely have it in northern Canada. And of course our version of history, the History Channel version, that's come down through the disciplines of science, through the education system, has been brought to us by the likes of these gentlemen here. We have Darwin. This is Charles Lyell. Let's take a closer look at Charles Lyell. So a Scottish geologist, educated at Oxford. He's basically one of the major voices responsible for uniformitarianism. It's basically that giving us a linear timeline of history that overtook catastrophism, which predated that. So we have a similar narrative here too, with the introducing of a new way of thinking. This all happening in the 1800s, and all happening through the same basically education system head areas such as Oxford, Edinburgh, Cambridge. All these guys come out of the same school systems with a similar agenda, it seems like, and they have these minor tiffs, but they all really boil down to the same thing in the end. So let's take a look at some of these figures of the 18th or 19th century, 1800s, that introduced this new way of thinking to the world. This is Joseph Hooker on the right, and we have Charles Lyell on the left. Here we're looking at a young Charles Darwin. I'm sure you all know who Charles Darwin is, responsible for our theories of evolution. It goes hand in hand with geology, so that's why I present it here in this video. This is Sir Richard Owen. This is the man responsible for dinosaurs and everything about dinosaurs. Interesting, a little point to that is the first dinosaur exhibit apparently was in the Crystal Palace exhibition, 1850. So a lot of people talk about the reset narrative having begun with that. And I found that an interesting sync there. Here he is, looking very sincere, doesn't he? The word dinosaur means terrible lizard. So I just wonder, are we talking about this or are we talking about this? Huh. So these are the men responsible for the way we think today about the world and the way we approach the way we view everything. This is why we're undoing this. This is why I'm undoing it in my mind. I don't trust any of these guys. This is James Hutton. You can look these guys up. I just wanted to bring you a couple visuals. Sir John Playfair. He was Darwin's best friend, they say, Dalton Hooker. Joseph Dalton Hooker. Then we get to Thomas Henry Huxley, otherwise known as Darwin's Bulldog. He's got the skull in his hand. Is there any symbolism going on here, or is it just an innocent portrait? You tell me. Darwin's Bulldog. Aggressively pushing Darwin's theories. And of course, there he is. That's the visual we know the most. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. There's truth in that, I would say. And deception, of course. Here we have Huxley, a young Huxley, who must have an itchy chest. So he's probably scratching himself in the middle of the photo. Or is there something else going on there? And I think it's important to take a quick look at some of the older maps, maps from the 1500s, early 1600s, that depict a North America without the Great Lakes. Here we have basically the St. Lawrence and the river system, basically, and looking a lot different than we're used to seeing today. We have Chalaga, Norumbega. If you've done any amount of this research, you're probably familiar with this phenomenon. It has been covered in other videos by other researchers. I'll put a few links in the description to some of those. And again, just to provide a quick contrast, this is a modern day depiction of North America. So you have, like we saw in the previous 500-year-old map, we have the St. Lawrence coming down to here, but we don't have all these bodies of water. We just have these rivers, and Hudson Bay looking a lot different. And I'd like to quickly throw in the phenomenon of Hyperborea. So we're looking at a map now as viewed from what we call the North Pole, stretching outward, and this landmass here referred to as Hyperborea. What I'm suggesting, proposing, don't know for sure, it's just a hypothesis, is that could there have been a blast that came from this point and basically caused a lot of the devastation we see, especially in what we call the northern hemisphere, emanating out, and could that have been an explanation for what we see as these bodies of water? So something to keep in mind. I just keep it in the back of my mind as I'm doing this research. Then let's have a look at one more map showing us something similar. Again, we don't really see these bodies of water like they exist on our maps today. And so in previous videos, and you can go back and check those out on my channel, I've suggested that we may be looking at some form of realm-wide devastation, where we once had a terraformed Earth or plane, whatever you want to call it, where most of what existed were habitable structures, and some form of devastation swept through. And in this video, then, I am making the suggestion that what we may be looking at as we scour the shores of the Great Lakes is not what these experts in their field have been describing as natural phenomena that occurred as a result of the receding of the glaciers from the previous ice age 12,000 years ago, but something much more recent and more of a catastrophism view of it, which a lot of this happened in a very short time. And are we looking at something that altered the state of matter in our reality? And there is a lot of evidence of these catastrophes occurring in different forms. And of course, every piece of evidence we take from the past, we take with a rather large grain of salt. So right now we're just going to roll through some of the visuals that I came across. I like to keep these water pictures just so you get a sense of the red rocks, which I suggest potentially are brick. This one interesting. Some of the angles you're going to see in nature here are undeniably at a 90-degree angle still. It's actually kind of comical to see them try to explain away these types of things. If you watch that History Channel documentary, and you watch the geologist standing in front of what looks like a rock wall or a brick wall that's been obliterated, trying to explain how these are different layers, and it was many years that formed this. I don't know. Personally, I find it comical at this point. I can't help but chuckle. And, I mean, it's kind of sad. You have these people that have, established quite a comfortable lifestyle with their knowledge, and they bought into what they were being taught at school, and they have decided to perpetuate what they had been taught at school, and any sort of doubt that's crept into their minds, I suspect, has gets squashed, buried, and then the mystery sort of for them, it's all about dispelling the mysteries, right? Well, I think we need to keep a little bit of mystery. We need to keep our egos in check and recognize that we really can't explain much of this. We're trying as best we can. And again, if you watch the video, you get a sense of how much we really don't know, and how much they really don't know, and how much is speculation, and how much we're leaning on their expertise to explain to us these phenomena. An interesting little piece of information too about the Great Lakes is there are salt deposits apparently under a couple of the Great Lakes, Erie, Huron, Michigan, I think they say. And if you watch that video, they'll give you an idea of how big the salt deposit is. Again, not that I trust everything they're saying, but there are salt mines. And just a couple photos here of the salt mines that exist underneath Lake Erie. And apparently this salt deposit goes on for expanding underneath several of the Great Lakes. It's just pretty an incredible little piece of the narrative as well. I thought this was interesting. Could that be a piece of a column? I don't know. So if you get into this catastrophism theory, I guess, where we had this circuit board Earth theory, we're looking at all sorts of different types of devastation. So it's not really uniform, so it's very difficult to say one thing happened to everything in the same way. We have different results, I think, from and I don't know why. I can't explain any of that. It's just sort of intuitive for me. This is how it looks. This is how it feels. That something's not right, and the narrative we have been given is basically to implant that linear timeline of history. Like I said, it ties in with the whole dinosaur founding, the millions of years, the thousands of years. The fact that we were, what is Darwin's theory? We came from monkeys, and then we sort of just figured things out along the way by accident, and everything is just sort of random, godless accident. I think that's scientism these days, and that's actually what I would suggest is showing its true colors right now in the narrative that we're living through, and we're finding out that that's a whole bunch of crap, basically. It's a deception. They are the deceivers. That's what they do, right? So, by way of stealth, right, the hidden hand, they deceive us. And in so doing, they control our actions and our thoughts. So there's no shortage of these. I'll go through a little bit more before we get into the buildings. Really is some incredible landscape around the Great Lakes. Kind of see here, you can see the rocks embedded in there. It's sort of a bit of a devastation effect going on. And then the natural phenomenon, we see this a lot again, the 90 degrees. So those are giveaways. And if you look at something like this and you can't see a wall, and I've shown in previous videos pictures of places in the Finger Lakes area where we have a man-made rock wall, and then we have what we're looking at here, and they sort of blend into each other. So what I suggest is we're looking at two different stages of devastation. One was devastated just a little bit more to a point where we call it natural phenomenon, and the other one we still have to call man-made. And this is a very good case in point here. You see actually the difference from this side to this side. This is Flower Pot Island in the Bruce Peninsula. This looking like it definitely could have been made by the hands of man, and then this is definitely what we call natural geological formation. So what I'm suggesting here is that it was all once structures of some sort. I know it's a vast departure. I've mentioned that in previous videos. Let your mind go and allow yourself to deconstruct the narrative they've given us. This is a good example here as well. We're looking at the bottom of this rock wall. This is looking like something we might see on those cliff sides. Starting to melt together, and then up here is starting to look more recognizable as a rock wall. So a bit of both there. And then you have, of course, the narrative of mining creeping into this. And then often these mines are a way to explain some of the old visible man-made phenomenon. And they're often combined red brick and stone. It doesn't really make sense to build that way. You typically have uniform material, and you would stick with that if you're building a structure. This is a very interesting area here. And I would suggest once you remove their filter, because it is definitely a filter, these things become a lot clearer to see for what they are. I would suggest as not geological formations that have been forming over time, but over long periods of time, but actually as a result of some form of devastation. And then these are the star forts. You get these a lot. This is Fort Wayne. There's several star forts along the Great Lakes as well, and the whole star fort narrative has been covered by other researchers. I haven't really gotten into it in my videos yet, but it's an interesting part of the circuit board Earth theory. They do refer to them as batteries. Battery being a holder of energy as we know it, right? So it's there's a lot of things that make sense about the circuit board Earth theory as far as an energy grid, as far as it being an energy grid. And I would like to show you a lot more of the photos I have, and just to give you an indication of how much there is along the Great Lakes to suggest that we are witnessing some sort of devastation, some meltification. And we also have the remains of older civilization buildings that remained intact. And again, I can't provide any timelines for you. I'm just suggesting that what we're looking at is from something previous, and then these 1800s figures that I showed you in the beginning of the video came along and reset the narrative and basically took control of our reality as we know it. So I think let's switch over now to some of the buildings that exist along those shorelines that I showed you. As we follow the rim of the Great Lakes, we're going to get into the whole concept of timelines and what I think we might be seeing here, what I speculate on, of course. I'm not going to be sharing where every building that you see is, but a lot of them will contain the name of the place in it. So the historical narrative is interesting, and it's very short here in North America. Most of these buildings will be attributed to having been built sometime between 1870 and 1920, I would suspect. Many of these buildings no longer standing, I found it an interesting narrative. And just to illustrate my point, here's a video of a gentleman touring the Malbork Castle in Poland. This castle being given an age of 800 years. And so it's interesting that we see similar buildings, even buildings that look older. You'll see in some of my photos looking easily this old, but we don't allow for that in our timeline, so it doesn't register in our consciousness. And of course, I'll leave the link in the description for that video if you want to check that castle out. Very interesting. But these are also what I would consider to be castles, even more so in some ways than what we just saw, where that Polish castle is almost completely red brick, and these ones get a lot of them get that bulging rock look, whether it's a veneer or from heat damage or from actual stone. Your guess is as good as mine. So we sort of covered a timeline. I showed you some early maps without the Great Lakes from the 1500s, early 1600s, so that's about 400 years ago. So if we're willing to entertain the possibility that there was some sort of realm-wide cataclysm, and a lot of people call it the mud flood, and if are we starting to maybe pinpoint a time frame somewhere in that range? It sort of jives with some of the other theories that we've seen. And then a digging out a redistribution of power on the grid, and then a digging out of what we call the mud flood realm-wide, happening 1700s, especially 1800s, and then a resetting from the mid-1800s on, a resetting with a new narrative that coincides with the Industrial Revolution. And of course, all these educated secret society types that implanting basically a new version of consciousness on us, with a linear history, a uniformitarian history rather than a catastrophism history, which apparently predated that, which makes more sense the more we look at this. And I would say one of the largest critiques that you will get from this narrative, and a lot of people that won't allow this to enter their consciousness, it has to do with the historical narrative we have of the native people of these regions, and how that timeline stretches back pre-Ice Age, and then we have to remember now that whole Ice Age timeline narrative has been implanted on us. So that's a filter that we see things through. And we all know that the native people all over the world, doesn't matter what color your skin is, from all different regions, have basically been decimated, wiped out, reset. So I don't see how we can reach back now into history and say we know we have a clear picture of the historical timeline. Everything is distorted. It's all been distorted for us. And what we're doing is trying to fit the historical narrative into the filter that we've been given by these robber baron type families. So you can't, I don't think you can make that argument without falling into the, what you might call a colonial implanted mindset. We have to dispense with all those illusions and recognize that we were in the not so distant future much more than we are now, and capable of much more. And I think that's one of the main reasons I do what I do. I'm not a prolific video maker. Obviously, I'm not trained in making any of these things. My whole idea is to bring you the visuals and to bring you some of my ideas, and that's what I'm here to do. It's very interesting too. Some of these old buildings are attributed as high schools. Let's see if we can get to one. I'm sure I've scrolled past a few as I was rambling. But high schools that either no longer in existence or still stand as high schools, some of them, which is mind-boggling. I've come across these all over North America. They really don't fit the bill as high schools. It's certainly not how we would build one today. And of course you get the city halls and all these different types of buildings and the mansions. So what I think is this is part of that takeover, the repurposing, slapping a name on a building already in existence. Oftentimes you'll see a building from this time frame. Here's a high school, Traverse City. But often you'll see a building from this time with windows blown out, like it's been, and then sort of mud coming right up to it, and then little sticks and branches growing right up against it, like it's being basically dug out from the mud. So this is interesting too. You see this window type look here. And we'll just hop back over to the Polish castle, the 800-year-old Polish castle. And then I'll show you the similarities here. There you go. See it here in all the windows. Okay, so it's the same look, and again we have this timeline distortion. And you get all these city halls along the Great Lakes having this very similar look. The tower and the four corners. Very interesting. There's another city hall. This carcow.com is a fantastic resource for looking at some of these old structures. Very difficult to find any other evidence sometimes, and we pull out a lot of these old structures from the muck, from the destruction of the 19th and 20th century, and still find evidence that they once stood. So my whole intention with this is just to give you a sense of the potential age of the civilization surrounding the Great Lakes. I have done previous videos on the Erie Canal, looking at the infrastructure embedded in the landscape, and there's much more to it than the Erie Canal. There's canals all over the region. Some of my viewers have alerted me to some of the other ones. The falls themselves, the Niagara Falls themselves, have some very interesting formations, basically embedded in the cliffs, looking like a part of the cliff. So very interesting as well. And of course, these major cities along the Great Lakes, just as Chicago, Milwaukee. You have Toronto. You have Buffalo, Toledo. Duluth. I did a video on Duluth. Check that out. I think we're looking at all evidence of Old World. Look at this. Like, this could easily be in Vienna, and they would be calling it a 400, 500-year-old building if it were in Vienna. So A timeline distortion, implanted sense of history, geology, the usual suspects, the Darwins, the Lyells, the Liars. They're all sort of play into this. So I think there's more to this than meets the eye. I think we are uncovering and getting closer. And I do thank you for joining me. I have a few more photos and I'm just going to play them out. Oh, I think I have to mention this one too. The Chamber of Commerce in Milwaukee. Absolutely incredible building. Worth its own video, for sure. As most of these are, I would say. Milwaukee again. The city of Milwaukee is just incredible. It's all about swilling beer now and eating cheese, right? Man, I think we're stupid. We don't have to be stupid, though. We don't have to buy the lie. We don't have to. They say we're in the age of revealing. I say that's what the term apocalypse stands for. It's really just the age of revealing. Nothing to be afraid of. It's like we're shedding their skin. Don't need it anymore. Never really did. Another high school, Toledo. Okay. Thanks for watching.